I have a problem. I need you to make something disappear. It's everywhere. And I'm fine, by the way. I can see that you're fine, okay? I'm happy that you're fine, okay? If you were gonna kill me, you would kill me. Did he say something before you blew up? Say something.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Ask. I don't know if it's Cheryl or who. Yeah, so the whistles are for me. We'll talk about it when we get to the report out. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. There is nothing to report from tonight's closed session. So we will begin with the pledge of allegiance, please. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll start with approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes or questions on the agenda for tonight? None from the council. Going to the public, any questions or comments on tonight's agenda? All right, then we're gonna go full steam ahead to minutes. Now we have a number of minutes.
Should we take a vote on have a motion?
Oh, please, we should.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Councilor Rodney.
I have to have a reason.
Sometimes I move a little too fast through the administrative portion. Okay, minutes. We have 4 minutes, January, February, March, April of this year. I think if it's okay with everyone, we'll batch them as a group. And if you have any questions or comments, just point out please which minutes you're referring to. So counselors, do you have any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, I had no changes or edits either, so let me then go to the public. Are there any questions or concerns about the 4 months of minutes? All right, bringing it back to the council then for a vote to approve.
Move to approve all the minutes from last 4 months, right?
Yeah. And is there a second? And all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, next up are the council committee assignments. So start with Councilor Tuttle. So maybe we'll move this way.
Nothing to report out.
Okay.
Thanks.
Me neither.
Did I say commissioner, by the way? I meant
Well, that's-
it's old habit.
I'm happy to report that I finally have a report. The Animal Advisory Committee met on Wednesday, the 8th of what month are we in, May? And you know, it was just mostly a general discussion of the mandate from the resolution. And then we began by focusing on aggressive dogs, figuring that that was the most immediate need. And just, nothing, there were no motions, no decisions, but, a recognition that we need to move at on the issue from the prevention and the consequences side. So at the next meeting, it was suggested that we have the sheriff and the animal control officer join us. And the next meeting is on the 10th of June. Match. Put your name in the jacket. Until what?
There was nothing to report from HCOG. It was a nice meeting, but they didn't get any real information. We did have our last trail meeting. We got through at least working on coming up with some post ideas, and that we were actually hoping to meet and look at the first actual poster plan of putting on the ground. We came up with an idea that would allow not too much ground disturbance, and we had an idea of how to create it. The Rancheria looked at the idea and they didn't think that it was going to be a sturdy enough idea, so they've offered to step in and help us create a post plan that they think will actually be more likely to stay in the ground what they were about to believe. We have to talk about it in the letter. I believe within there, people are going to probably try to push them out. They just so they're still working. They're coming in to help work on this. So we got some experts. They find some their ideas, and the next time we meet, we will hopefully have their input. And we'll, by the end of the year, we'll actually have the first actual idea of how to get. We'll see more of them coming up. So we're a little bit falling behind on what we're hoping to do. We are looking like we might be going somewhere in terms of getting some better ideas and some stronger. Please go in that direction.
I just have a couple of quick things. Eli and I had a meeting with law enforcement April 11th, and I know he's going to be talking about that a little later in the meeting, with resulting in new contracts and reduced costs to the cities. That was really great. I had attended the Community Organizations Active in Disasters COAD meeting on April 29th, and it was mostly a report out from the 12 different working groups, and so I'm not going to go into detail about it, but just know that there are folks out there thinking about how to support rural areas with food needs and emergencies and response and all this kind of thing, and coordinating across the different agencies. I was honored to attend the Rancheria's Tea to Trust luncheon on May 1st. That, as many of you may know, was the transfer of the harbor property to BIA to hold for the Trinidad Rancheria. It was an honor to be there. The tribal council was there. The director of BIA was there. There was also Rex Ballon, the county supervisor, was there. I don't think Jackie's on, or I would have her comment, but it was just really touching to see the excitement of all the tribal members and the others who were present there. And there were many comments made about the work that the Rancheria had done on the harbor, the new pier, et cetera, all the stormwater improvements and the Memorial Lighthouse. Let's see, we had the CERT Community Disaster Preparedness Day this past Saturday. And that's why the counselors have little orange whistles on their desk, because we gave those out to everyone who attended, and we also gave away prizes. Larry Goldberg did a wonderful presentation on kind of general emergency preparedness, and the CERT team hosted 5 tables on things like wildfire prep and earthquake preparedness. I was thrilled that CAL FIRE came. We had 4 representatives from CAL FIRE and their engine parked outside for tours and so forth. So the low light is that it was Saturday. It was a beautiful day. And we had this from 1 to 4. So of course we only had about 13 people that were able to attend. So we're going to try to plan another event in the fall, and we're hoping for really dismal weather so that we can get a good, it's the only event I've ever thought about canceling because the weather was good. So
Probably get your wish.
yeah. We need to schedule a water advisory committee, so I'm a little behind on that, but I had reached out to the state water board and I'm asking them to send someone And so I haven't been able to close on that, but I thought that'd be a good water advisory committee activity. All right, so that's it there. So are there any questions or comments from the council about the committee report outs? Any questions from the public? Committee report outs? Okay, all right, wonderful. Then we'll move to staff reports and I'll turn it over to our city manager, Eli.
Hey, thank you. And I'll start off by turning it over to Lieutenant Josh McCall from the Sheriff's Office.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Having a little, it's a little quiet on my end, but just my laptop, so just wanted to confirm. Excuse me. So yeah, looking at the greater area Trinidad stats for the month of April, and again, this would be the outlying area as well, not just the city proper. Calls for service were down a few. We were 152 for March, down to 148 in April. However, reports taken were up. We had 18 taken in April.
Lieutenant McCall, I'm sorry. Can you just a minute? I apologize. We had a burn for anyone's here.
No problem.
Yeah, the fire alarm went off right after you asked if we could hear you. We could.
Okay.
So we're ready now.
It's all good.
Loud.
We're ready to go for it.
Ready? Okay. So yeah, I figured you guys just drowned me out. That's probably better anyways. So calls for service for the greater Trinidad area. So this would be obviously the outlying area as well, not just the within the city limits. We're down by a few from the previous month. We had 148 for April, which was down by just 4 from the previous month, 152 in March. That being said, reports taken were up. We had 9 in March. It was up to 18 in April. 3 arrests for the month of April. We had 12 felony investigations, which was doubled from the previous month, and 29 showing 29 misdemeanor investigations, which was significantly up from the one that was taken in March. 3 assaults, 4 burglaries to either buildings or vehicles, 1 vandalism, 1 general disturbance. None of those calls were a significant increase or anything from the month previous. So I'm not sure, without diving into the stats a little bit further, why the misdemeanor investigations were up so significantly. But obviously those investigations that those resulted in weren't of those types of crimes. So aside from that, the other numbers stayed pretty consistent with the previous month. No spikes of anything or anything that looks like any kind of suggesting any kind of a trend or an uptick in any particular crime. Looking more specifically at stats for within the city limits, for April, we had a total of 35 either calls for service or proactive activities by deputies in the area. 4 of those were just general Trinidad patrols, 3 animal problems, 3 business checks, 3 follow-up calls, 3 transfers to other agencies, likely fire or medical, a couple of alarm calls, a couple of assaults, a couple of pedestrian stops, a couple of vehicle burglaries, and then 1 each of just other random things: civil problems, incorrigible juvenile, patrol check, lost property, found property, traffic stop, that type of thing. And again, nothing that's appears to show any kind of real uptick of anything crime wise or problem wise. And then just looking for that month, looks like Saturday, Tuesday, and Wednesday all kind of tied for the busiest days of the week, with 9 calls for service on each of those days, and daytime hours between 8 and 2 being kind of the busiest time for those. So that's all I have here in front of me, and so I guess if there's any questions.
No, that was good. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to start seeing animal, listed here as the type of call too, because in the past, I don't think we've seen that as much. So obviously we're getting folks responding to, not that we want animal problems, but we're getting people, we're getting a law enforcement response to that. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to just thank you because one of those calls was me. And I called because we had a skunk, looked like it was dying right in front of our house. So we saw a skunk that was very sick. And the sheriff came up, he talked to me and said, you know, that skunk's probably fine. And then a dog came along and ran away. But it was throwing up and miserable. It's nice to have him come up and help us. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing that.
I moved to strike that from the minutes.
Thank you, Lieutenant McCall.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm back to
Okay.
you, Eli.
Thank you.
That's funny.
So, yeah, we got, yeah. Wonder if they're related.
Yes, I bet they are.
Yeah. So, in the city manager's report, the water tank and pipeline project is continuing. Most of the work on Edward Street has been completed. We're working on West Haven Drive right now. They're putting in the water pipeline from the water plant to the tank site. And then also we did have some residents complain about the quality of the road on Edward Street. So they were able to attend to that and pave it for the short term right now. And then as soon as they're done with the portion of Edwards, there's a couple more things they're waiting for. And when they're done with that, they will repave that area. So it'll be better than what it is right now. But at least it is properly paved enough that vehicles aren't getting damaged. The Art Marine Celtic Fair was canceled. They wanted to have entertainment in the town hall, which was fine, and then have booths outside and possibly utilize the school grounds too. The only problem is with the entertainment, they were going to sell hundreds more tickets than what the capacity of this room is in order to make everything work out. And we were concerned because of the fire code, so we didn't want to have an issue. And I know, at least personally, if I buy a ticket somewhere, I'd like to be in there. And if not everyone that could be here at the same time, it could be an issue. So as a result, we're going to try to find a larger venue. They had looked at some larger venues before they were talking here. But the person who was heading that is from the Trinidad area, the greater Trinidad area. And that's why he was hoping to have it here. We were looking forward to having it here. But that's the reason that we didn't want to create a problem that was unsafe. The Trinidad Chamber is planning their Taste of Trinidad. It'll be on Summer Solstice Eve, which is a Thursday, June 20th, from 5 to 7 at Saunders Park. Also, in addition to food and drinks, band is called Kumi's Apartment. The next chamber mixer will be on July 17th. Again, I think it's in the 5 to 7 time period. And it'll be at the Secret Beach Retreat, which is a short-term rental on Stagecoach Drive. If you know John Lee, that's his site. The chamber also awarded 2 $1,000 scholarships to former Trinidad school students who have one's going to a charter school and the other one McKinleyville High School. And so this will help them with their college. And the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail, the goal is to have it open in July, working with the Churai management team. Today, we had a meeting and we'll have a follow-up meeting probably on Thursday afternoon. Today's meeting was with RCAA, representative from the Churai, myself, and Public Works. And the RCAA was able to cut a path through the new portion of where the trail will go, which is actually, according to the Churai, the old portion. That's where the trail naturally went. Or 1989, 1998, somewhere in there. But in the late 90s, it was diverted to its current path, but now it's going to go back to the original path. And they were even asking that, we're gonna have a cleanup that day. Not when I say that day, middle of July, we're gonna have a cleanup, a group of students and their and actually parishioners from Reading, along with parents, will be coming to do a beach cleanup. And the chair, I was saying that maybe it's possible for Axel Lindgren III to greet them down there and explain to them about the significance of Old Home Beach and so on. And then Sarah and I also talked about something that she had mentioned before, which would be to have like some education that's working with the high school, with the elementary school across the street, and then also for the community, where we can have Axel Lindgren III and or other representatives from the Chura help educate us all on the history of this area. Okay, and then the Van Wyck Trail, I do mention in there that at the last council meeting, the upslope property owners, 2 of them had attended. Subsequently, they both reached out to the Chura Ancestral Society and heard back that the Ancestral Society and the Yurok tribe were maintaining their opposition to having the trail reopened, even if it is upslope. So that's just an update. We're continuing on that. We have a coastal commission meeting with the local staff next Monday. Trevor and myself and Steve, I think Steve will be there too. Steve. So anyway, we'll be talking with the coastal commission next. The Trinidad Head Steps we had gotten a bid from RCAA last year, and we're planning on improving those steps this year. So we just wanted the public to know the same group, RCAA, that will be redoing the Van Wyck Trail will be working on the Trinidad Head Steps. And then the last thing that's mentioned here, which is important, is the water plant. So specifically, I start off with April, because in April, it was brought to our attention that the water plant was having a hard time keeping up, even at night, when it was producing 15,000 gallons and 12,000 gallons were used between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m., which was quite unusual. So that led to our CPO feeling that there's some distribution line that's broken. So staff started looking around Public Works, and they were unable to find it. It took a few days, but eventually it started to bubble through the surface of Scenic Drive. So anyway, it was taken care of, but as a result, according to the loss report that Gabe prepared, we lost 41.8% last month. So the cost of that with the labor time, and then also in March, because we had high turbidity, both of those months ended up costing more money than we normally would pay in recent time to Coleman Engineering. The past 6 months up until March, we were averaging 10,426 per month. However, for the month of March, because of the turbidity, which took so many, the plant kept calling and had to be restarted and so on. So it took again a lot of labor. So that increased the cost by around 4,000 for that month. And the same thing happened in April because of the plant having a hard time keeping up. So it cost us an additional. Also, I've identified a math professor from College of the Redwoods to assist our staff in understanding the complex math problems that are posed on the water treatment operator exams. They've been doing well on the exams that they've taken, but they've said that the math problems were their down. So as a result, we're making that arrangement. And we also have one of our employees who is taking an exam this week, the end of this week. So hopefully things will be able to happen for several of the operators where they can successfully pass the exam. So that's the update.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
about the traffic calming situation, I think we had some counts done, what, last month?
Right.
Where are things now?
At the next meeting in June, Josh will make a presentation of the traffic count. So the traffic counts were done, and then GHD analyzed them, and they're going to present that to the council in June.
The only comment I had is on the water plant. I mean, it's unfortunately had a leak, so. I wonder if it's time for the city to consider putting an ad up to hire a T3 plant operator. Or, you know, what you think about that, you know?
Yeah, we're holding off at the moment because we actually just hired a public works employee who is interested in pursuing the water, water plant, treatment. And we do have two people, and actually a third one also, who are currently taking and or are going to be taking their exam. So as soon as we, and then of course we're going to have some mat training. So as soon as we see how all that plays out, then possibly by June I'll have a better idea. But since we do have a number, and then when we did the interviews for Public Works for that temporary position, one of the people who interviewed has a degree. I think it was from Berkeley. But anyway, I can't remember right offhand. But it's a degree in which is related to natural resources, which could be very helpful for the water plant. So I am going to be talking to him this week, probably on Thursday. So anyway, we have a few things that are going on, and then we'll have a better idea next month. So you could ask me that.
Okay, I'll ask you about it next month. In the water advisory committee, this came up, and it's come up in some public feedback that I've received, that the city is taking too long with its process to kind of train people up and get them certified, and that it's been a year since our last plant operator left, maybe more than that, I can't remember.
Yeah, it's been a year. Yeah, it's been a year. Yeah, a few months extra.
Yeah, so we pursued this approach of leveraging an outside contractor to run the water plant, which has been expensive, and so folks are giving us a lot of feedback on it. So I'm just gonna say that yes, I am gonna come back in June, and I'm gonna with some real strong recommendations about this, because we've been talking about it for about a year now. So I just think, yeah, we should really consider just hiring a chief plant.
And again, when we had originally put ads out, we were unsuccessful in finding someone, and eventually Coleman, with the people that they were having them help at the plant, one of them was interested, and that's how we got it. It was not through our advertising. But again, we can always reach out.
Yeah, so maybe we should revisit
Yeah.
in a future meeting, but just kind of the process that we have gone through and that we're going through. And is the person taking a test next week? Is that a T3 exam?
T3.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
And I wish that.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions for Eli on the staff report? Any public comments or questions regarding the staff report and or law enforcement? I guess we already covered that. Okay. All right. Thank you, Eli.
Thanks.
At this time, we'll do items from the floor, and members of the public may comment on items not appearing on tonight's agenda.
An announcement about the 40, can't remember which annual ceremony at the Memorial Ball will be held on Sunday, May 26th at 2 p.m. And the names of 296 people lost a very busy read and bagpipes and hats. Don't ring the bell. And Coast Guard representative, Peace Light. There's no seating. The
the ceremony is usually 35 to 45 minutes and we're all invited, and it will be at the Edwards and Trinity site. The Trinidad Memorial Lighthouse at the Harbor Project is nearing completion, looking awfully nice, and so there's a little confusion on whether it would be there. But it would be. Yeah, so. Oh, you can come.
Thank you. Look forward to it. Other public comments this evening? Right, it's quiet tonight. Okay, with that, then I'll move on and we'll go to the consent agenda. And I guess first I'll ask the counselors if there are anything you want to pull from the questions or comments. Right, and any public questions or comments about tonight's consent?
I did, on number 5, resolution 2406, federal functional classification map change for scenic drive. Is it possible to know what that is?
Pull that and discuss it. We can pull that and make that the first agenda item. Does the council agree with that change? And
I'm just curious, Ms. Fletcher, if you just want us to do a quick definition of what that is, or do you want to discuss?
No, I don't know what it is. I just wondered. Drive.
okay, if it's just a quick discussion, then we'll do it now. If it's more than that, then we'll agendize it. So who wants to? I know enough to be dangerous, so I think I would turn the staff on this one.
While Eli's looking it up real quick, I'll just tell you where it came from. It came from the crack that developed because of that leak.
Oh,
The city engineer, Josh Wolf, and I took a look at that crack, and he immediately said that in situations like this where we have catastrophic failure on the scenic, we need to have that road classified under the federal status so that we could receive funding in the event there is a serious emergency, and apparently it wasn't. So he jumped right on it, contacted the representatives of the county and said, hey, I want the Trinidad road to be in that category, so that in the event there's a big, expensive failure in the road, the city could qualify for federal. I'll let Eli confirm. I think that's my summary there.
Yeah, actually, when I had reviewed this, it's very simple portion that I wanted to read. So basically, Scenic Drive is currently identified as a 6 minor collector. And the new proposed classification is to make it a 5 major collector. So it goes from a minor collector to a major collector to better identify the condition and the traffic that it receives.
like all of scenic drive could be classified in that way.
It's consistent with how the
General disaster.
Yeah, it's consistent with how the county public works had it classified, and we had the city's chunk was just not. So this puts that whole road in that category.
I think there's a definition online on the federal website, and I don't have it in front of me, but it did say that, you know, kind of the difference between minor and major also had to do with speed. So I was surprised that they would agree to this actually, but it'll be good if they do, because it becomes federal apparently. All right. Is there a motion with regard to the consent agenda at this point?
Move to approve the consent agenda. I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, let's move on then to tonight's action items and discussion. That we start with the very controversial, I'm joking, sorry, I shouldn't joke. Proclamation 2024-02, recognition and support of North Coast Lemonade Day on June 1st, 2024. So, you want me to cover this one, you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, since so I got a letter from the Lemonade people. I should know who they were, but anyway, so they were asking throughout Humboldt County, there's a proposal for a North Coast Lemonade Day. I thought it could be very fun. It's about getting children involved in entrepreneurial activities and things like setting up lemonade stands, but they're getting support in general from like business people and so forth. So It sounded pretty fun. I don't have a lot of background, but it is apparently a national celebration that now is coming to Humboldt County. So that's, any questions or comments about Lemonade Day? Please. Okay, I thought we'd have a good, healthy debate about this. All right, any public comments about declaring June 1st Lemonade Day? All right, back to the council. I'm going to move to approve since I brought it to the council. Any?
I will second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, then we move on to discussion item number 2, which is regarding the contract with Humboldt County Sheriff Office, and this is to provide law enforcement services to the city of Trinidad. And I mentioned earlier that Eli and I met with them in April, so this would be a good time to get a little more information about that.
Thank you. So in the packet, there is a letter from Regina Fuller, who's the Deputy Director of Financial Support Services for the Sheriff's Office. It basically summarizes it, and then there's a contract attached. Basically, our contract for last year was $226,168. And the new proposed contract will drop it down to $67,500. We have already paid for 2 quarters, which were $113,084. So we are going to get a reimbursement of overpayment of $45,584, plus have a lower contract for next year. That's thanks partly to Blue Lake, because they're in the same situation we are. And apparently the sheriff's office was using 2 different formulas, one for a city that's a little bit larger and we being the smaller city. So now we have the same formula as Blue Lake, and that's brought our opinion. And then, like Cheryl said, that the 2 of us met with the captain and with Regina Fuller, and went over different things because some of the numbers they had were inaccurate. They had gotten from one of the county offices that we had 70 short-term rentals. So we had to correct them that we have a maximum of 32. We currently had 30. So they've adjusted the contract to reflect the 30 because they added those numbers in as if people were living in there year-round. So they increased our population from the 309 to like 410. But either way, it brought the contract down considerably, and that's yes.
A question, how was this caught? I mean, that's a sizable change in what we're paying the sheriff.
Yeah, I wouldn't use so much the word caught as it is because of Blue Lake. When our contract went up to 226,000, their contract went up over 300,000, close to 400,000. And even though we're a smaller city, we have more sales tax revenue than they do. And as a result, it was too tight on their budget. So they told the sheriff, we just can't live with a contract like this for just patrol. So anyway, they negotiated. Originally, we were going to have a negotiation with Trinidad and Blue Lake. And then they says, okay, we'll negotiate with each party separately. So they started off with Blue Lake, and Blue Lake was able to bring down the cost of their contract. And then Blue Lake made a point of letting them know that, look, you can't use 2 different formulas. You should have one consistent formula. So as a result, when they applied the consistent formula that they negotiated with Blue Lake, it brought our costs down considerably.
How long had we known of the $226,000 price tag?
This was since July of 2023.
And we had thought that that was what we were going to have to pay for
For the year. Yeah.
the year. And it is only because Blue Lake demurred for their price.
That's the main reason. That's the main reason. But what we were doing is we went ahead and we decided to pay and move forward with the contract because it was still considerably less than what Blue Lake was paying, number one. And number two, our community wants to have more law enforcement. So as a result, we didn't want to give up the sheriff.
But am I understanding correctly, if Blue Lake hadn't noticed and said they couldn't afford it, let's talk, we would still be paying $226,000.
It could be, yeah, it's possible.
Although I think another contributing factor was Regina Fuller had the deputy director there. She had to leave because she had an injury, I believe, or something. And so part of it was when she came back, she really went through the books and got, things really organized and looked at all the costs and how those costs were distributed. And so she did a stellar job, I think, of going through and kind of rationalizing everything.
Who is she?
She's deputy director of financial and support services at Humboldt County Sheriff's
Oh,
Office.
at the sheriff.
So,
She's at the sheriff's office, and she really was very impressed with her diligence.
so originally, our contract was lower, but what they did, and Regina had done it before she went on leave. So we were paying for one deputy, even though we were originally receiving one deputy on the ground. And then at times we had a deputy and a half. But even with the patrols, they were basing it on one deputy. So the 226 was based upon one deputy and the cost of benefits on top of it. So that's the formula they use. But then now they're using a different formula.
Yeah, so overall, great news from
Yeah.
a budget perspective.
They're-
Any other questions about this? All right, any public comments or questions about law enforcement? Mr. Hakenin.
This is wonderful. Thank you to Blue Lake and send them a cake or something. This is preparing the city financially, which we desperately need. I took a spin through the contract as I was reading the packet ahead of the meeting, and I've read the previous contracts. I didn't notice anything really missing. I want to confirm there's no change in the level of service with this new contract from what we have, which is basically patrol, no full-time deputy, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and we specifically asked them, can you guys give us a deputy? And
They're still not.
they're still not.
Fair enough. All right, thank you.
And I think the other thing to add is that the animal shelter and animal control agreements are coming next. And those, one of them went up a bit, one of them went down, and so they kind of balanced each other out. And so we're back to what, so we have a good, pretty good deal there as well. So anyway, but that'll be coming, right, Eli?
Yeah, and actually, the last numbers we got, they both went down.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in the process of getting those contracts to us, they provide the same services for other cities in the county. So they're waiting to work out the whole package for everybody, and then they'll bring it forward to us. So that's why it took a little bit longer than this one, because this and the Blue Lake one were only tailored to 2 cities. The others are tailored to the whole county.
Is animal control under sheriff or a separate department?
Under the sheriff.
All right, other questions from the public regarding the law enforcement agreement? All right, then I'll bring it back to us. Do we need a decision on this? So I think I will make a motion to approve the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department Law Enforcement Services Agreement to the City of Trinidad.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, the next item is discussion decision regarding resolution 2024-08, calling for an election on a proposal to continue the City of Trinidad's 0.75% transaction and use sales tax for 4 more years. And so I will turn that over to staff.
Okay. Dave, you want to take it?
Sure, thanks. Thank you, Eli. This is a resolution that's required. Many requirements that the city's obligated to fulfill leading up to the election. And I think I mentioned that at the March 12th meeting, the staff presented the history of the 0.75 tax, the voter approval percentages for each election held, and how the revenue serves not only the city, but also the community at large. So at that meeting, we heard from public comment, and I kind of just want to point these things out because I like it when these things are in the record. because it makes it easier to fall back on when, like, many conversations we've had recently where we want to go back to the record to kind of refresh ourselves. So if you just bear with me for a second here, in the packet, I continue to say that, you know, the council heard public comments from Trinidad area residents who felt the tax was unfair, if we recall, on March 12th, because they were inadvertently paying it without the ability to vote on it. The council also heard from in-city residents who expressed an interest in fiscal responsibility and accountability and supported it. So the last thing I'll note is that the staff presented that this was a general tax and it could be spent at the discretion of the council for the purpose of not only serving the city's needs, but also in ways that invest in the greater good of the entire Trinidad area. So with that, a follow-up from that meeting, we talked about putting a list of in-city addresses on the city website. Councilmember Lagway brought that up and requested that to happen in April and May, and that's been done to assist in facilitating, you know, when people get in the predicament of where they, you know, are asked to pay that tax. And at the conclusion of the meeting, the staff was directed to prepare documentation for a ballot measure for the November election regarding the add-on. So that is what this is today. It's a follow-up from that meeting to just put it in a resolution format. The State Board or California Department of Tax and Fee Administration is going to be looking for this resolution before it will begin to implement this tax, should it pass. So this is step, I guess you could say it's step 2 in this process. And we'll be bringing back a resolution, I'm sorry, an ordinance at a future meeting, probably not next meeting, but in July, basically saying a continuation of the ordinance that we currently had should it pass in November. So it's sort of a preemptive approach to ask the California Department of Fee Administration to not begin decommissioning the tax until we've had the election, right? So this resolution, long story short, must be done, and it's building on a directive that the council has given staff to continue. So hopefully there's an answer to your question.
I just want to say thanks for getting those list of addresses. I think that was a major concern. And I really appreciate that service to the greater Trinidad area residents.
Where is it on the website?
On the website right now, it's under doing business. So on the far, there's a menu bar across the top of the website that has, you know, city government and, you know, I think 4 or 5 headings.
Yeah, so it's the fourth.
It's the fourth one closest to the right, doing business. There's several categories in their business licenses and so on. And then the sales tax is going to have its own tab. And anything that we do as a result of this, we can put up there so that the public can, you know, see the transparency, how we're trying to see it.
Yeah, and I think we also talked about coming up with I guess a short list of things that the city does that does actually benefit the greater Trinidad area. Things like the CERT team and all of the kind of investments in that, and then there were some other examples. So it may be only 4 or 5 things, but maybe when we have the discussion, maybe we can brainstorm what those are and make sure that, you know, that some of that money that we are getting is going to.
And we produced one of those in the voters guide last 4 years ago.
Okay.
A real nice list of how that money is used and such. So
Oh, great.
yeah,
Okay.
it was 10, 12 bullets. It was
Okay.
It was not small.
Not a small number.
Not
Great.
a small number. It was a very inclusive list of ways that money benefits the greater.
Fantastic. So yeah, maybe we can just resurface that then.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions from the council or comments for Gabe? All right, any public comments about the proposed sales tax? Okay, I don't see any, so I'm going to return it to the council.
I move to approve resolution 2024-08.
And I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, on to our next item of business, which is the discussion decision regarding resolution 2024-09, adopting the uniform public construction cost accounting and review procedures, and the first reading of ordinance 2024-01, adding new, this whole thing. It's in the packet, adding new chapter 4 to title 3 of the Trinidad Municipal Code to provide informational bidding procedures under the Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Action. And I apologize, folks, I probably wouldn't have started reading that had I, I would have abbreviated, but that's the item on the agenda. So am I turning it over to Gabe or?
Well, I can get started briefly here.
Okay.
And then maybe Gabe can add. So basically, we have both a resolution and an ordinance, and we're following the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act. And this is a program that's available to all public entities in the state. So what it does is it spells out the procedure that's necessary for purchasing, and basically when you need to get bids, and also when you need to get formal bids, and then also when you could do something based upon like a sole source, specific type of use that such as windows here in the town hall, getting someone that is an expert in the historic and architecture and can do type of windows that would be compatible with the design rather than just someone that does windows in general. So basically it says here that cities under 75,000 population, which we are, and it says benefits the city of Trinidad of adopting this act include simplified bidding and expedited contracting for projects that are 200,000 or less, and reduced number of bids based on project size. These provisions reduce the time, effort, and expense associated with the bidding projects under 200,000 and simplified administration for these projects. And the procedures for bidding for large projects are typically handled by the contract city engineer and generally would remain the same. Okay. I don't know what else you'd like to add to that.
I think what you just said right there, where it says these provisions reduce the time, effort, and expense associated with the bidding projects under 200,000 and simplified administration for those projects, I think says it all. I mean, that's what this city has been up against for several, if not a decade or more. When we start getting more grants, as this town has gotten hungry for grants and really good at getting grants, it just really spelled out how specific the bidding process for public entities is. You know, because there's so many hoops you got to jump through. But then the one thing we didn't, so we started marching to the beat of that drum in every little thing we did. And every time we went looking to hire an electrician to do something in the town hall, we realized that it was a can of worms, you know, to work for a public entity. So to draw a connection between why this is before you now, then or how it got here, it's our town hall projects. So we have this informal committee that we're talking to, West and Kelly here, and Eli and I we're meeting to talk about how we can make improvements to the town hall. Well, without something like this in place, we were up against, you know, formal bids for projects over $3,000 to $5,000. And it's just not feasible when you got to do windows and you got to do floors, and you got to do painting. So the kicker here with this one is $200,000 is the threshold for maintenance projects, which gives the city a lot of latitude to get these projects done, and that includes the tennis court. You know, so having these barriers removed, we still have to, you know, we're still going to do our diligence. We're still going to get the informal bids. We're just going to call 3 painting contractors, for instance, make sure they have all the proper licensing and insurances to do work for public entities. But we're not gonna just go hire a buddy to come paint the town hall. There's still informal procedures involved that keep the public entity honest. But what this does is it raises that threshold significantly for the amount of money that we can spend to get things done. And with a lean staff, we need to be able to call, get some informal bids, and then just go for it. Otherwise, with paperwork, it can be just really heavy. So by adopting this code, there was a guy named Richard Marks. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy. He used to attend our meetings every once in a while and call out when we did something wrong.
Yeah.
I think with the town hall solar project, he caught that Haven Electric didn't have its Department of Industrial Relations registration. And it was just an oversight. I mean, they had it, but it expired. And this is what people do. They watch public entities. If you do one thing wrong, they'll be there to catch your actions and they put you back in line. And he's the one that recommended it. So whatever he's having, we're on.
It's just new.
You know, I don't think it's really been brought to our attention, and the city does maintenance projects, but I think, like I said, a decade ago, things were a little different. You know, we would just call people to have them redo the town hall, you know, office, you know, and we would want to have somebody do it. But like I said, the more we've gotten involved in grants, and the more we've really started watching how the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and the more money we receive from other higher level entities, we've been kept in check. You know, if you didn't know, well, you can just get your wrist slapped and say, I didn't know, but we know better now as a city.
Do you think that's why like the curb hasn't been fixed over by, you know?
Great question.
Yeah.
No, that I think is something maybe Eli can answer. You're talking about the sandbags?
Yeah, just why the, yeah.
Below the curve, the drop.
Mhm.
That would be a question maybe Eli can answer. It has to do with the Chura study.
Right. Yeah, because we have to get their buy-in.
Can I ask about the 200,000? I'm just curious how that number was generated.
It's not a number that we have. It's a number that is set by, I believe,
By the
it's
act.
the act, which is enforced and I believe by the state controller's office. Is what we're saying. So that number is specifically for maintenance. We can't build anything new for 200,000. It's got to be strictly for maintenance of existing projects.
No, I just asked because you mentioned, you know, $5,000 projects and we're now upping it to 2. So
It's a big difference.
that it's, well, but it's the act that sets that number.
Exactly.
So.
So
Thank you.
am I understanding that up to 200,000, we can do informal bidding?
Yes.
Over 200,000, we have to use a formal process?
Yes. Yes. And new construction.
And-
Any new
and-
construction needs
oh,
the
so
formal
it's
bid process,
maintenance.
but it's strictly maintenance.
I mean, I'm all for streamlining so that we can get things done, because we do get really slowed down sometimes by the process. And that process is labor intensive for staff. I think as the kind of fiduciary responsibility, we're saying, the fact that we're still saying we're gonna get multiple bids where appropriate, and it's just the form that it takes. So, right, so I want people to know that we're still gonna want competitive bids. It's just that we don't have to go through as much paper.
I have one more thing on that note is any decisions that are made for projects like the windows of the town hall or painting of the town hall will come back before the council, even though it's budgeted. We'll be letting the council know. So we want to maintain that transparency during this process. And we'll be able to explain that we received 3 informal bids. This one was the lowest, the company, you know, I'm not the painting, whatever, they're gonna get the job. So, and we'll be asking for permission from the council.
Okay, any other comments from the council or questions? All right, and from the public, any comments or questions? All right, bringing it back then to the council.
Move to approve resolution 2024-09.
I'll second.
Seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. You're on number 5 on today's agenda, which is the discussion, presentation, and update on the water rate analysis.
Okay. So, as stated in the agenda item packet, at the next council meeting, which we're going to have a second meeting this month because of the budget process, we will also have Samantha Ryan, who is from RCAC, and they're the entity that is doing our water rate study. But this is just a preview before she's here, just to sort of like give you some information and a background. So hopefully we can focus a little bit more on what she's presenting and discuss that. rather than, trying to figure out, okay, where did we get here with everything? So number one, yeah, so just to know that her services are being provided as a grant from USDA. So the city is not paying for the services rate study. So there's various options to consider. There's the base rate, which is everybody pays the same base rate, whether you use water or you don't use water. And then there's a consumption rate, meaning after a certain amount of gas be paying for each gallon that you use. And then there's possible categories. We currently have the category of in-city and outside city rates. And most cities, if not all cities, have some kind of an inside and outside rate. In the attached memo from the attorney's office, they did give an example of Arcata, but they're not the only one. They just used the example of Arcata. And actually, some of the other cities, such as Fortuna and Rio Del, are even higher outside the city.
And we're going to discuss that in the next meeting,
Meeting.
correct? So
Exactly.
people will have a chance to weigh in,
Right.
and we got a public comment about that and so.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other thing that's mentioned under possible categories is something that we haven't used, and that is meter size. So Samantha Ryan was explaining that that's another way that you can charge different rates. We don't have that many different meter sizes. And as a result, we may be shying away from that particular approach. So then I say attachment 1 is the memo from Mitchell Law Firm. And in that memo, it explains a little bit more as far as what the law is. And then I go on to say a factor to consider is that from 2012 and 2017, when we did our last rate study in 2012, which was effective for 5 years to 2017, it had an automatic COLA increase of 2.5% per year. If we had done another rate study in 2018, we could have been as high as, because that was 6 to 7 years ago, we could have been as high as 15 to 17.5% as far as base rate. Could have been that much higher. And the reason I'm stating that is that I'm hoping that the public doesn't get what I would call like a sticker shock. When they feel like, gee, why are we getting this huge increase? I want people to understand that they really saved money for the last 6 to 7 years. So as a result, just by us increasing now a little bit more than what they might be anticipating, it doesn't mean that, we're basically going from 30 to 60. We could have been going, whatever. I'm just using that as far as when you're driving. So those numbers don't mean anything, but I'm just saying that when you're driving, we're already moving. So we do have a water rates in there. So anyway, she will be presenting, I believe, 3 different options for the council to consider. And in addition to that, we can always tell her, what about this or what about that, and maybe pursue some other option. In other words, if one of them is not the meters and you think that's one you want to pursue, that would be fine. So the water fund needs to cover the cost of operation and maintenance, plus to have a reserve fund for future CIP, capital improvement projects. So in July of 2020, the city council transferred $975,000 from the water operating funds to the water reserves. So a lot of people refer to our reserves and say, why are we using the reserves to pay for operating costs? Well, yes, ideally we can use the reserves for other uses, but we have to use it. But what I'm saying here is I use the phrase, and this is just my own phrase, sort of a reverse transfer. In other words, it was from the operating funds. We put it in reserves, but now we need it for operating, and we used it for operating. So the city council has communicated, or I'm sorry, has committed to reimburse the water fund with general fund revenue to cover the additional costs of Coleman engineering above the cost of operating the water plant with licensed cities. So what I'm getting to here is basically people from residents from the public and water users from the public had said that the cost of Coleman was much higher than they felt was necessary. And as a result, they felt like, hey, we shouldn't have to pay for that. So what we're doing is saying, instead of having the water fund pay for that additional cost, that we could have that transferred from the general fund reserves, which we do have some general fund reserves. So I took that and I had presented it at a prior meeting, but basically I took the difference of how much for the past 2 1/4 years Coleman has cost us, and how much it would have cost us if we just operated the water plant with a chief plant operator at the $40 per hour, and add to that 1 or 2 T2 to help assist. So when I did that, the difference was basically 300,000. So a suggestion, which I think she's incorporating that with Samantha Ryan in her numbers, is the potential of having $300,000 going from the city reserves, general fund reserves, to the water fund. So that helps bring down the overall cost of what the monthly bills would be for the resident. And then I said additionally in June, which that's city council, yeah, I'm saying if we could consider additional funds or at a future time, depending on whenever we have the final meeting. But we're thinking possibly June that we would have a meeting, and then after that, we put it out to the public to see if they like the options. Now, if we come up with other options beyond what Samantha Ryan is going to present, that might take us an extra, meeting. But what I'm getting at is the city council could consider additional funds as a loan to the water fund if necessary and available. So if we have funds available from the general fund reserve, and we feel like, we'd like to help out the water fund in the short run, we can do it as a loan. And then when the water fund, starts collecting at the higher rate, then we can pay off the loan from the water fund to the general fund. The main reason for that is that the general fund is for the 309 residents of the city, the households of the city, because that's part of the city. Versus the water fund is a enterprise fund, which is a separate fund, and we have almost 50% of the water users are outside the city limits. When I say 50%, 1/3 are actually. So 2/3, meaning like 200 and some, are in the city, and 100 and some are outside the city. So when you make a loan, 1/3 of the people who are going to benefit are going to be outside the city. So ideally, you wouldn't just keep giving money from the residents to people that are outside the city. But this 300,000 should be taken into consideration when we're saying, outside city limits, that we are giving a benefit. It's something that was from the city coffers, from the city general fund, which is coming from the property tax, coming from the TOT tax, and coming from the regular sales tax that every city and county receive, which is 1%. We automatically all get 1%. We only happen to have an additional 3/4 set that sometimes people outside the city. Even that, generally speaking, if you're buying a high-ticket number item, meaning like a car, it will reflect exactly where your zip code is and your residence is. That you are in a zip code, but you are in the county, and therefore it reflects the county rate. And then I finish it off by saying, after completion of the water rate study and choice of rate option by the city council, a Prop 218 process will take place. So that process is that the city will mail out a notice to water customers of the proposed rates and hold a public hearing after 45 days to assess the public's input. So basically, we do a mailing, we give that mailing up to 45 days. People don't like the rate increase, they can object to it. If over 50% object to it, then we have to go to the drawing board. So hopefully that gives you at least a general idea of the lay of the land.
Yeah, so Eli, is it true that at one time we were increasing the rates 2% a year and then it just stopped?
Yeah, it's the 2.5% you can only increase for 5 years, and then you have to do another rate study. So that's why it's stopped.
So there hasn't been a rate study for 7 years, in other words.
Yes, it's yes, 2017 was when it ran out, so 2018, ideally we would have done a rate study.
The June is the meeting when this woman is going to.
She's actually going to come to the second meeting in May. So
Oh, the
she'll be
28th.
here on May 28th. And then she'll probably come back in June, but we'll see. We'll see how we progress in May, and then she'll be able to tell us if she'll be able to come back with numbers in 2 weeks or if she needs any longer.
I was just thinking that the more that the public knew about this, these options being presented and explained before we send them something in the mail, that we might get more buy-in than the surprise of opening your mail to, oops.
Yeah, sure. No, that's a good
So
point.
is there some, well, we would have to promote it in some way. I mean, these are open meetings, and that doesn't mean people are gonna come
Yeah.
unless they really know that this
Right.
is what's being discussed.
Maybe we can.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, ideally, the council, wants to try to pick an option that they think could work best. And then we want to get buy-in from the community. So we do have around 325 water accounts. So if you send a letter or something right now to everybody and tell them we're going to talk about it at the meeting, you're going to have probably 325 people here. And it will make it difficult for us to make a decision. So ideally we'll make a decision, and then they're given 45 days to evaluate it. It wouldn't hurt to let them know we're going to be discussing that, definitely, and that's what we do through the process. But we want to make what I call, a decision that we feel, works properly, rather than having confusion and commotion, because anytime anyone wants to raise anything, then people are going to be concerned. I know I used to be.
I would probably come at it slightly differently. I think actually having a number of people here would be good.
No,
It would take time, but the nice thing is that we get, to help us.
okay.
I think, I think that's kind of the point of having public in the city council meeting, right? Is to get us to think a little bit differently, rather than we come in with a formed opinion.
Right.
It's modified by what we hear from the public.
And people are gonna respond by email, by letter, as I come in.
Right. Yeah.
We'll still get plenty of
I
public.
think we'll
input on
get plenty
this.
of input, yeah.
How come we didn't do a rate study in 2018? So it could have just increased small over the last couple of years instead of having a big dump right now.
Yeah, I don't know. Ideally
Because,
that would have been.
In 5 years from now, I want to make sure we have another rate study so this doesn't happen.
Right.
I think Jack voted to not do it.
Steve and I just ignored them.
Yeah. I was just you guys were gonna say it, so I just put it out there.
I really don't remember.
I didn't even know you guys were on
Yeah.
that.
Discussion about this at that time at all, so this is now slipped through the last.
To be honest, the real reason is it wasn't broken. So it wasn't in the eye of anyone.
Gotcha.
And until you put the focus on something, people are just happy to pay the bill and not worry. Yeah.
I think the only other question I had is there was a lot of there's a lot of assumptions that went into the creation of this model. And so are those assumptions going to be exposed when she presents? In other words, like what you went through, Eli, of it was it would have cost $40 an hour for this person and so on. And all those assumptions that went into creating the cost model, we will see. And Gabe's nodding his head. So that's good because we may have some math questions along the way.
Yeah, it'll reflect, what the actual cost to operate the water plant would be.
Of course, yes. Okay, great.
And we're basing it upon, having a CPO who's a T3 operator, who's a city employee, and having 2 T2s. So it's based on that formula, not on the current formula, just a transition formula.
At what year was it that the city council voted not to go with Humboldt?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was 2020 or 2020.
21? Yeah.
That was, is that right? It was 21.
It was either 21 or 20. It was a while ago. Yeah.
I can look it up. Okay. Other,
It was by Zoom. I was in Soldotna, Alaska. My internet ran out right when the vote was going on. I zoomed back in. We voted on that thing 2 or 3 times.
yeah.
Yeah.
To make sure that we had an accurate vote and accurate, no Zoom
Right.
drops. So that's why I know when this happened. That was fun.
So we could blame it on Zoom. At that time, it was WebEx, so Zoom has worked better.
Sure.
And other questions or comments from the council on this?
Michael, we gotta get
Renee?
information about what she's gonna present in advance.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
We get it early.
And I would just ask, I just remember previous discussions about the amount to hold in reserve, and I remember this, the city general fund reserve was meant to allow the city to operate for 18 months without a single dollar coming in. That was our decision on how much to hold in reserve. I would love to know from this analysis what considerations are being used for the reserve. I also remember authorizing a expenditure of $70,000 for filters that had aged out. And so what is the reserve based on? Is it replacement of, certain elements of the water? Is it plant? Is it based on all kinds of different things? So that's what I would like to know, is what that reserve, because that's going to inform the rate, is how quickly do we need to build up the reserve to maintain it over time and that kind of. So
Yeah, so Steve Allen prepared at the request of Samantha, basically, these are the things we need within 5 years. These are the things we need like within 10 years, so on and so forth.
yeah.
So basically, we're focused on, what we need to get done in the short term, but we want to have the big picture at the same time too. Anything to add to that, Gabe? Because Gabe was with me when we.
And does the water fund pay for busted pipes, or is that the public works general fund? Distribution?
It's all water.
It's okay, so distribution is part of water funds.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Because that also informs this, because all of our pipes are aging, many of our pipes are aging, so. That would also inform the reserve, is how much do we do on the replacement.
And how much is recouped through grants, and grant funding? Yeah. That'll be interesting. Okay. Any public comments regarding the water rate analysis?
I missed who Samantha Ryan is. Is she a state person or?
She is with RCAC, which is the Rural Community. It's not Action Assistance Corporation.
Is that a state agent?
No, I guess it's a nonprofit, but it's a corporation. It's not part of the state.
Is she being paid by the city from the water fund or?
No, she is being paid by USDA funds. Now, some of these other water rate studies through RCAC are paid for through the Department of Water. They just didn't. They regularly get it through USDA.
Right. Aaron, did
And we appreciate Patty because she writes a great article, and she always wants to make sure that the information is accurate. There's nothing better than reading in a newspaper and seeing the accurate information. So
Rural,
thank
Rural Community Assistance Corporation.
you.
Thank you. Right, Aaron, you had a comment?
Yeah, just a couple comments. One, I would strongly urge the city and council to put on the calendar in 4 years' time to begin the process of commissioning our next rate study, so we don't run into this gap of time where we're not able to have coal as if that's deemed appropriate. My second question is what input are you planning to seek, if any, from the Water Advisory Committee? Being a member of that, I think it's an opportunity to get more public input and to get some more opinions, which we do struggle for in this community. And then I would also strongly take a different tack that I think as much notice as can be given and as much opportunity for the public to have access to all background information, particularly this next meeting where they can firsthand hear Samantha's presentation. I think the cost of mailing a notice to the 300 and however many folks is well worth the possibility of people in here. And speak from a planning commissioner standpoint, when we're desperate for feedback, I would love to have a room full of people. I would love to have a long meeting every now and then for great reports. And this is one that is just that. So I really encourage you to take that request from me and provide direction to do that. I think that would be a huge missed opportunity to not do it.
I will, yes, I agree. I will schedule a WAC, a Water Advisory Committee. I mentioned it earlier in passing, but I had hoped to get the State Water Board there and I haven't heard back from them, so I won't hold it up anymore, trying to get that done. But I will continue to work on that, but let's get something set up for the water rate. And
I mean, one thing that could
be a good
done-
first pass, right?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that could be done is to specifically invite all of the Water Advisory Committee members to each of the meetings that we have Samantha present. So that this way, you know, they're well versed on everything. And then they can give us some input, you know, what we could do, if you'd like, is after, you know, the council, you know, ask questions or whatever, turn it to the Water Advisory Committee members and then turn it to the public.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if she's coming in June, then maybe we could do a Water Advisory Committee before that, but I guess we would need her there. So to your point, it has to be kind of scheduled together, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want her, then, you know, it ideally would be together.
I see.
I mean, we can reach out and find out how it would all work with her schedule, because even though she is in Humboldt County, most weeks she's 4 days outside of him.
Okay.
And if I heard you correctly, she's coming in May and then
Yeah,
again June.
Yeah, May 28th, and then ideally to the June meeting, the council meeting, which is the 12th.
I'm just spitballing here, but I suspect that the May meeting will generate enough questions that would need some further investigation.
Right.
So perhaps the Water Advisory Committee meets after that May meeting
Yeah.
and does some of the heavy lifting of, well, let's look into this, let's look into that. I'm just, again,
Sounds good.
I'm just making up ideas, but
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds, yeah.
that way the advisory committee can benefit from the work that's being done and also steer it before it's all like, well, I've already done this report and I'm moving on to my next job. That way the
Yeah.
RCAC has some time to pivot if need be.
I think it would be a good idea, Cheryl, to let the rest of the committee members know that this presentation is on point.
Yes.
They can attend the meeting if they choose.
Yeah,
Get more
I'll send
information.
it out, Aaron. That's a good idea. Okay, other public comments regarding the water rate analysis? Okay, seeing none, back to the council. I think at this point, this was an update, so unless there's anything else, we'll go to the next item, which is the presentation update regarding FY 2024 budget and the upcoming budget preparation timeline. So Gabe, is that one going to you? Yeah, okay.
Unless.
Oh, yeah, I'll just let Gabe take the lead on it, and I can also add as needed.
Okay.
Maybe I should throw this up on the screen. We have some visuals.
Make that larger.
Yeah.
Good.
So. I'm- There. That last discussion was a good segue into this one. And what we're talking about tonight is more or less a timeline and a chronology of events that will occur between now and this next, and what we expect to be the adoption of the budget on June 11th. Which is why we have our May 28th meeting this month, 2 meetings. But as you can tell already, there's gonna be a lot of heavy topics regarding city finances, primarily with the water fund, the focus. And tonight is more, I just wanna kick it off, and we'll talk about the timeline. You know, we can throttle comments and maybe questions with the timeline laid out, so we know when the best time would be to approach certain things. But tonight, I figured we could just introduce the process and, you know, field some questions, talk about where we are today with regards to our current financial status with the general fund and the water fund. And then we'll blaze a trail for the next meeting, which will really drill down to some serious numbers, and then hopefully open that conversation up for more fine tuning, and then come back in June. We can have more discussion, or we can come back with a finished product. I'm pretty confident that the budget this year process, with the exception of the water fund and how we kind of have to approach the water fund, I'm pretty confident we can nail this in the next month. So what, and I think we have to, because we're not having a second meeting.
Right.
So whenever we talk about budget, I like to kind of go back, you know, rewind just slightly so we can kind of pick up where we left off before. And for anyone new in the room that may not understand the situation, they have an opportunity to engage in the process with a little bit of knowledge. So I'm just gonna kind of talk, this is the summary that I put together, just a one-pager here that really kind of is our outline for today's meeting. But I'll talk about how the annual budget here is a spending plan intended to reflect the goals and priorities of the city council and to keep up. This is something I'm really starting to see more and more lately, is keep up with increasing pressures of state and federal policies that set the framework for government operation. Both of these forces are competing for resources. So we've got the state that wants their share, the feds that want to do it their way. And every time I open up my email, I find another request or demand for a reporting from some higher level agency that really, it's starting to kind of become very cumbersome. You know, it's starting to, every time I open my email and I see a report demand, I think, okay, who do we have on staff that's going to do this? You know, so I don't know if it's a matter of COVID money flowing around or water resources being tight in the past, but then they kind of opened up when we had the drought. Well, when the money starts to flow, then these agencies want to kind of add on like some reporting documents. You know, once they, hey, take some money, we got money for you. But then they start to talk about how they want you to report on the money that you spent, right? So the city of Trinidad is really good at going and getting money, but now all of a sudden, you know, we're starting to find ourselves stuck in a hard place, having to report on everything that we're doing to it. So both forces compete for resources, and the balance between mandatory and discretionary funding spending continues to tilt in favor of mandatory, especially. Let's see. So inflation, social dynamics, during the COVID era brought subsequent growing pains to this city operations that will demand attention in the years coming, starting now. That's specifically with the water fund and how we lost staff. During COVID era, people were not, T3 operators were not coming hand over foot to drop off resumes in Trinidad. So this is what we're selling right now. We're really trying to put the water fund back together. We also received some money to the tune of about $110,000 from the higher up governments during COVID for COVID relief, which we have access to now. We didn't spend that money, although we claim that we did for public safety, and we reported that we did. But currently we have some money left over that we need to use. And the federal government has opened up opportunities for those monies to be spent, not just for plastic shields and rubber gloves and face masks anymore, but now it's water infrastructure and all kinds of other exciting things. So we found ourselves sitting on a pile of money now to the tune of probably about, I think it's about $70,000 sitting in our fund that we can use to maybe creatively backfill the water fund where we've lost a ton of money, right? As the budget process unfolds, we're going to examine what resources exist that can be used to navigate, the higher ed take, but also fine-tune our personnel structure, stay on task with long-term priorities, and meet the growing needs of the city based on the current forecasted economic trends. At this point, right now, I don't really see too much happening. The state obviously is pulling back. They're having some massive financial difficulties. And they'll be possibly, they're dipping into their reserves significantly, and so is the county. Right now, the way I see Trinidad, and I recently received, just very recently, which is why you don't have it yet, we had to engage services with our past auditor, Ralph Marcello, because at the mid-year budget, and even at the last meeting, we talked about some of the general fund numbers. And I didn't have an audit from 2023 to really hang my hat on. So we were basically working with unaudited 2023 fiscal year ending numbers. When Ralph agreed to come back in March, just recently in March, he came up to Trinidad and we hired him to basically reconcile our 2023 statement to make sure all the numbers were true and correct. But he also gave us some reconciled numbers for the year end December 2023. So he went 6 months ahead because I know that we have a lot of concerns about the water fund. And I was nervous about trying to make any forecasts or predictions based on numbers that we just didn't know. So I have some numbers here that basically suggest that the Trinidad's general fund continues to grow every year. And in 2023 fiscal year end, it actually gained $200,000 to now be close to about $2.2 million in reserves, which is really incredible. But on the flip side,
Interest on investments?
that's interest on investments. That's money that the city has wisely reserved in past years, dedicated to various categories, such as budget stabilization, capital improvement reserves, and various other projects. And as we know, that revenue source of sales tax is incredibly volatile. We saw it during COVID, where in Trinidad it went up and other places it went down, because people shopping online, and having their stuff delivered instead of going to brick and mortar stores, for instance. So the general fund reserves are in a healthy place. And part of the reasons why we gained $200,000 in the general fund in 2023, this was last June, was we also didn't spend like we wanted to, because we've had some serious staff issues in terms of having people that can get out here and help us spend money. And we've run into these problems like this cost accounting thing that you adopted tonight to kind of blow the doors open on that so we can start spending money without having to have a grant staff constantly there holding our hands every time we want to hire an electrician to come and fix the light. So I think that Trinidad is faring, I'll say that Trinidad is faring very well from the general fund perspective. Currently, very healthy for a small city. As we know, though, $2.2 million isn't a whole lot of money. Look what happened to the water fund in the last 2.5 years. $1 million can dry up like that. So Trinidad's reserves targets are right on spec with what is expected in both resolutions, but also some of the own policies that the city has created for itself. So that's one of the reasons why I feel like the budget process over the next couple of weeks, if not month, will be pretty smooth. Because the general fund is the biggest portion of the city's discretionary spending.
Can I ask real quick, Gabe, will we see the audit findings then for 23 at the next meeting or?
You will see the reconciled financial statements. Ralph led he had audited for the city for 19 years.
Yeah.
And he retired 2 years ago. He let his auditing credentials, CPA credentials lapse. So he came out of retirement to do about 80% of the work so that we can then hire an auditor to do the final audit recommendations, to give it their stamp of approval.
Yeah. I only ask because Humboldt Transit Authority is facing a similar situation where we just had our audit from 2023 last month.
Right.
That a lot of municipalities are just sitting around waiting. So I just don't want folks to be alarmed that we haven't had our audit from last fiscal year.
Well, we should feel a lot better that we've had our statements reconciled.
Yeah.
That is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
But, you know, as we've learned, and we're probably gonna learn the hard way, a lot of times, you know, audits are tied to steps in other processes, such as grants. You know, we're required to submit our audit to the state controller's office every year. If not, we could be fined.
Yeah.
So we need to, Eli's working on this. You know, last time I checked, we were searching for an auditor that can do the remaining 20% of our financial.
And as a side note, I mean, once we pass the procedures tonight, then this is gonna expedite it.
So a couple of things I put in the packet. I uploaded these documents to the packet for archival purposes. There's no decision-making process involved tonight, so I just wanted them to be with this packet. And something that I can display, you know, for council review. It's while we're talking. The current year is kind of my very first step. When I look at the, you know, audit from the prior year to find out how much we may have put away or how much we spend in deficit, then I can kind of illustrate and narrate, you know, to you, if we propose deficit spending, well, you kind of have to look at city or government financials over the course of like a 2 or 3 year period. Because if the last 2 years you socked away $300,000, and this year you're planning on overspending $50,000 or $60,000, it doesn't seem nearly as bad as if you tell the public and you recognize that you're deficit spending. Why are we deficit spending? Why can't we live within our means, right? So I like to look at the past year, and I also like to look at where we are today. And currently the April financials are in a packet. They're not the most fun to look at, unless you really, you know, are interested in diving and geeking out on those numbers, which I like to do. But I also like to talk about the big picture. You know, for this room and for this venue, I think it's nice to drill down when there are concerns. But I also think it's really nice to look at the big picture, because then you can see what your goals and priorities were, where we landed, are we on track, are we off track, and then course correct as necessary. So examining the financial statements, first of all, through April are in the packet, and that's going to be my first step, is to really dig into those. But what I also will do, and I'll make sure that's in the next packet, is the reconciled financial statements. So we typically put those statements in the packet when there's an audit, right? Here's our audit. It's in the packet. It's done. It's over. We don't have that right now, but we're going to put these statements in lieu of it. So the big picture is something that I wanted to kind of talk about, and I think I also included in here the mid-year review that we just had, which was kind of eye-opening. And if I just scroll quickly to the mid-year, I want to just point out for maybe for Katie and Jack, because I know you guys have been through this before, but you know, we have 4 major revenue and expenditure sources in the city, right? There's the general fund, which is it covers our administrative payrolls, it covers public works payrolls, it covers police, and it covers fire. Police is also covered by a cops grant, but any overflow, which now we're not going to have next year likely, is going to be covered by the general fund. There are 2 restricted funds that the city is managing. You call another word is a proprietary fund, and that's the water and the cemetery. Water is legally bound to being a proprietary fund, which means that the rates cover the costs. You can't go dipping into the general fund and backfilling unless you do it intentionally. You can do whatever you want with the general fund. You can put the money in, you have to make it by resolution. Council can't, management and staff can't just go put money in places. Water fund money, let's just stay within the fund, because the ratepayers have to understand that the rates are specifically set to cover the charges. You can't just go create a slush fund in the water fund. You have to be able to justify those costs. And then we have special revenues, that's gas tax, money that comes from the pumps at the gas stations. When people put gas in their tanks, thank you very much. When a $500, RV load of gas goes into a tank and then they get back on the freeway and they take off, they leave a chunk of change behind for Trinidad. That's lovely. And then there's also TDA funds. It's what do you call it? Transportation development. Those funds are used to pay for the bus service that Steve, you sit on the HTA board. That money comes in from, I believe it's through HCOG, and then we just pass it right over directly to HTA to pay for our annual bus service contract. And then we have COPS funding. COPS funding comes from federal government funding. It's money that comes to all cities, all agencies, and typically Trinidad sees about $150,000 a year for that, and we put that right back in to cover the sheriff's contract. And we may have a surplus this coming year thanks to the reorganization of how those funds and those contracts were costed out. And then we have our grants. Right, grants are huge. Grants right now, I think we're probably backfilling the city's staffing funds to the tune of about 160,000 or more a year. So that pays for most of our grant salaries that are for our administrators, and then it also goes into when Kyle, when Derek, anybody, myself, Eli, are attending water intertie meetings. We're attending these weekly tank and pipeline meetings with the contractors doing the water. These are funds that the grants actually do a lot of. They pay a good portion of the city. Well, they pay almost all of the grant administrators' salaries, but then they pay a little bit of here and there for various staff that participate in those projects. So the general revenue sources are sales taxes, occupancy taxes, fees for services such as building permits, rents and franchise incomes, which we get from PG&E, we get from Sunlink for running their lines through town. We collect a small portion. It's a very small percentage. I think it's like 2, 3, something like that, percentage of the gross receipts that all the customers in Trinidad pay. That comes back to the city on a quarterly basis. And those revenues are unrestricted. You can use them to buy a playground. You can use them to fix the town hallway. Those are called discretionary expenses. Restricted revenues, again, are water, cemetery, transportation, gas taxes. You can't use gas tax money, to put a new sound system in the town. We get audited for those funds every year. The staff report from the June 13th meeting was our benchmark. When we hold that June meeting, that's when I take the budget and I take all of the interesting comments that the public has made or the council has directed staff to do, and I try to write them in a narrative that you can understand. Because when you're looking at a 15, 20-page budget, you can't say exactly, it's hard to read it and say what it's doing. Like, are you supporting law enforcement? You're supporting the town's desire for additional law enforcement. Well, you can put a number to that, and then you can spell it out specifically in your narrative, right? So I try to put these narratives together at the adoption of each budget that give us a nice roadmap as to what is expected for accountability, not just of the council, but also staff.
Mhm.
So let me see if I can get to the big picture. So there's a document in here that we adopted in 2023. I think it's dragging on the screen there. Might be a little bit hard to read, but as you can see, the profile of the city's financial status in primarily the general fund shows revenues of right around $800,000. That is what the city typically brings in. And when I get asked the question from other cities and other people in the city government businesses, what's your general fund budget like? That's the answer I give them. I'll say, well, about less than $1 million, and they laugh, right? But then when they find out we've got $6 million in grants, they can't believe it. You know, it doesn't make any sense. It's definitely unique for a small city like this. And then our expenses that come out of these revenues, typically what we do is identify them as, it's a little blurry, but general fund admin, public works, fire, police, cemetery, and waste management. So I know I said the cemetery fund is a proprietary fund, but it's not by law. It was just set up like that. And in fact, our previous audits have suggested we roll the cemetery fund into the general fund. I'm not necessarily a fan of that because we also, you'll be hearing from us in another month or two, at least maybe month, some adjusted cemetery rate structures, which has been was a promise in our budget that we just adopted that would be looked at. That's an entirely separate conversation. But I roll it into this budget because some of the cemetery expenses go to public works employees who have to maintain most of them. And as you can see, our expense forecast for this current year, which is a little clearer, but is it mine?
It's a little
blurry. Okay. So we expected when we adopted this budget this past year of a deficit in the general fund of 91,000. But we knew at the time too that we had a surplus of probably 200,000 from the prior year, and we knew exactly why. It's because we underspent. So I'm finding out in the December 30 statement that Ralph Marcello provided to us that we're seeing approximately, I think so far, as of December 31, so far we've had a surplus of about $40,000. Now we're halfway through the year, so we're not going to hit the $200,000 benchmark, surplus that was from the prior year, and that was a rollout of a COVID year. We didn't have the staff to spend the money. This year, we're probably going to see that either the budget balanced completely, we're not going to be deficit spending, or a slight surplus. So, and that has a lot of it to do with staffing. We lost a public works employee this year who we're not paying the salary for at least half of this year, which we just began recruiting for a new public works, and hopefully we'll have someone hired. It's half-time help. And some of the goals I think I listed here as highlights in this big picture. And honestly, you've seen this before, and we intentionally last year in your budget focused on getting back to work. Not necessarily trying to bite off too many pie in the sky projects, which is why we ended up with a surplus before, because we realized we couldn't do it unless we had a good core staff. So this year, when this current fiscal year, we wanted to just maintain status quo, but also do some very unique things that we heard were problems, which is sort of focus on staff retention, upward mobility, and pay, to make sure that we had a core group of employees that were trained, that were able to help us achieve the goals, help Eli achieve the goals that you set for us. And I think we've done a pretty good job with that. But instead of getting too far deep into the highlights for the general fund, and like I said, we're in really good shape, I figured we'd talk a little bit tonight about the fund. Just to kick it off, because I think it's also important that we get some direction from the council in how to proceed. But I think we also have some goals that we want to share with you as well, which Eli and I talked about recently, but and I'll share with you again here in a second. But I think the general fund's in really good shape. And I think over the next 2 weeks, I'm really going to drill down to some of the numbers, get the financial statements, and start to prepare the charts that show where we're at as of today. And here's what I think we're going to need for next year. And as far as help goes, when we provide that document to you, I'll try to give you a summary. I know Katie likes summaries. We'll put together a nice summary, kind of explaining how far we're going to go in terms of any kind of plans for deficit spending or spending some or saving. And then that's when we're gonna give you the opportunity, if it's okay, and even tonight as well, to throw out some of your discretionary wish lists that we can try to incorporate, because you are the people who hear from the public what you feel is needed, and you're elected to represent it, right? So it's your job to direct to staff, here's some of the things that we want you to do, guys. See if you can somehow show us where some money will be budgeted for these things, because these are the things that you're hearing. So, that being said, we've got obviously some, reserve goals, which we're not gonna hit this year, but with the KUKA ordinance that we just adopted, it'll hopefully give us the opportunity to really get the wheels turning on the town hall. We all know that the town hall needs some love. We know that it's an election year, and we know that there's a sales tax hanging in the balance in November. So I like the idea of trying to take this summer to really put some of the visual wheels in motion, so that when the people are driving by town and then they go home and they see a ballot that says, hey, do you want to keep the sales tax going? They think about the police cars that are going around town. They think of Pacific Coast Security, all the things that you've been telling the city, hey, we want this, guys. And then also maybe seeing a nice town hall, maybe seeing Edward Street repaved here when the tank and pipeline project gets finished. You know, all the benefits of living in this city, and the eye candy, the tennis court, you know, adding a pickleball element to it, which we're really hoping to do by the end of this summer. So the budget hopefully will reflect not only some of the things that you've been asking us to do for the last 2 years, but also poise the city in a position to be able to be accountable for the money it earns. But as far as the general fund relative to the water fund, I'll say this, that the water fund is I think the way I put it in last year's staff report was that it was leaking oil. You know, and it is leaking oil, and Eli's got a plan, which I think is a good one, and hopefully we'll hear more about it at the next May 28th meeting. The water fund is out of money. The reserves are gone, right? But the general fund is your reserve tank in this particular case. And I think what Eli and I would like to do next, for either the next meeting or the June meeting, is to get the council to adopt a resolution that will allow the general fund, either on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, to replenish the water fund until it's shored up and it can sustain on its own. And the first step in doing that would be this, the transferring money from the general fund of $300,000, and we'll be able to explain to you how this is justifiable, to shore the water fund back up so it can sustain until the rates go into effect. So that's one step. As far as staffing goes, the water fund rates, as it was brought up earlier, they are going to be based on what we feel is our dream budget, not the crazy budget, you know, not the unsustainable budget that we currently have. We actually developed a budget before we started the rate process that included X, Y, and Z operators in-house. And hopefully everyone is trained who's working for the city in water treatment, so that there will always be the next person up in the event we lose an operator. So other than the financial statements and other than talking about, you know, some of the goals that this budget currently that we're using and experiencing has done for us, which I think we touched on in the mid-year budget, like how far we were going, what we were doing, what we checked and what we didn't check off the box. I think the fund balances is where I really wanted to start tonight, and I wanted to answer any questions that anyone might have, or have staff answer any questions, myself or Eli. If there's anything glaring or something you really want us to focus on over the next 2 weeks until we get to you with some real numbers. That's focusing. Sorry.
Good job, thank you.
Any questions for Gabe? No.
Great summary.
I just have one really quick one, which was in your budget where you talk about rate adjustments, optimization, big picture, future planning. This was already in there, right? This was what we had thought about back last year that we might do, because, okay, got it. All right, I didn't really have a specific question about it, just a general question.
I'd like to, on the next meeting, when we talk about lending money from the general fund to the water fund, talk about how much money we would have had in our coffers if we were increasing rates 2% a year for the last 5 years. What would that would have been? Maybe we wouldn't have any loss right now. You know, for us to know.
Yeah. All right, any?
Well, just, I don't know if this is the right time or place, but I think the city, really ought to figure out a way to underground the last remaining power lines that are on View and on Underwood. And not, you know, that's not a cheap thing, and PG&E is setting aside like 35 cents every 10 years for us. So I don't want to wait for that. Who are unlucky enough to live underneath the few remaining feet of power lines. We all benefit by those things going underground. But again, with planning, right? With proper planning, we can do, 100 feet at a time. That's something that I've heard over and over and over and over. And I don't think it's wise to wait for the PG&E allotment, because it's just such a small town will never see enough money out of PG&E based on their formula to set money aside for undergrounding. And we're not in fire zone X, Y, and the View is not really, again, so few people are affected by it that our formula just isn't enough to really rely on. And yet, really all of us benefit from the View improvement of those wires.
And I'm just curious, I know it's a little outside of our purview, but has it ever been discussed to underground the wires on power lines on Trinidad? That ever come up? No?
Yeah.
I know that would be a whole different, but when we took the cell tower off, and I actually think that the electrical wires are even more kind of light,
It's
to be honest, but
And that's
yeah.
piece of land.
Yeah.
So
Not saying
It hasn't
Tackle that
been
one.
brought up before, and we could always consider it. However, just visualizing what you're talking about, with the poles and ground disturbance, it's a lot more limited than doing the power lines totally underneath.
Right, so you're saying there would be more ground disturbance, and
Right.
it could be a cultural issue. I agree, and that's why I was wondering if it had ever been discussed, because on the flip side, it's nice to get it off from a view perspective. Okay.
And just
Just
as what
curious.
Steve was saying, GD is no longer putting money in for that kind of fund. They changed it.
Yeah.
So the little money is no longer there.
we'll spend that 35 cents on the window replacement here.
There you go.
All right.
Okay, so any public comments regarding that?
Just very quickly wanted to say thank you to the council for investing in the CERT team for our community. I spoke briefly with Gabe tonight, and I'll be forwarding a small modest budgetary request to the council. It's important to keep investing in the CERT team. Our goal is to be as self-sustaining as possible through fundraising, bake sales, that type of thing. We have access to grant funding. We have our own 501c3 organization we can apply to grants for to not burden city staff, but will have some ongoing costs, and it would certainly ease the burden for our volunteer members to have those costs covered. So expect to see that, and I'll get that to Gabe too. Thanks.
Thank you. All right,
Are we doing wish lists at this point?
yes, sure.
Okay.
Why not?
I don't know, any way to put a figure on this yet, but the Animal Advisory Committee is going to be talking about things like dog parks. And that's would mean fencing and signs and things like that. At least I don't know what else we'll want, but I know that one's gonna come up at some point.
Right, and we'll talk to, be thinking about things, because we'll be talking about it some more as we craft next year's budget and, park some, look to park some money for various projects. All right, I don't see any other comments from the council, so let's move on to the November 2024 city
No,
election
okay.
and sales. So yes,
Is there anything else from the public? Was it
I
just
had asked for public comments before that, so I didn't see any, so I brought it back.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, I kind of went to the public and then
Okay.
didn't see more and brought it back to the council. Thank you for keeping me on track though here. There's a lot of
Thank you for
agenda
keeping
items.
me
tonight.
I thought that's what they whistled.
Yeah, that's. November 2024 city election and sales tax measure update.
Me.
Okay.
Eli wants to.
No,
And I'll be quick. This is something we're gonna see every month until the election, and then we'll be over with it. But I like to keep it in the calendar and on every agenda so we can, understand. So it helps me when it's in the agenda packet, make sure I'm not missing any deadlines. So this month, May, we had an adoption of a resolution calling for the election and proposal to extend the sales tax check. We had a resolution requesting a election consolidation with the county check. And we've continued or started the budget preparations check. So next month, we have another meeting in May, and we're gonna continue that budget in May, but we're also in June then gonna have the adoption of the budget, and then we'll also prepare and announce the upcoming elections. So for those council members who are looking at retirement here in the headlights, that'll be the opportunity for them to go find their replacement.
Already,
Yeah.
I've actually asked Jack to pay my suit.
You can have one.
We'll do it.
That's a tradition in Trinidad.
Yeah.
Find your replacement or you stay.
I'm looking.
Yeah, I've been putting out feelers too, but yeah, tough shoes to fill, first of all, but.
So that's all, no action required. This is just, I start with this month to make sure we check the boxes and I'll throw out what's happening.
One thing I forgot to mention too is we have the community survey out right now, and so we will get responses back from that. That will help us, hopefully by June, have some, better sense of the public priorities that we can represent, so that'll be helpful. All right, any questions for Gabe on this item on election and sales tax? Okay, any public questions regarding item number 7? Okay, I don't see any, so I'll bring it back to the council. There's no vote or anything on this one, so thank you, Gabe, very much for keeping us on track. The next item is future agenda items. Are there anything anybody wants to tee up?
So May 28th, just so I'm clear, is the introduction to the water rate study and another budget discussion.
Correct, yeah.
And just so I'm clear, are we going to announce it to the public or send a letter out for the 28th or for June?
Eli, what do you think?
I think if we're gonna send a letter out, I think we should send it before the 28th. Give people an opportunity.
For the 28th.
Yeah, before the 28th, that they could attend either the 28th or the.
So like, there are 2 meetings
Right.
and there'll be an opportunity.
Yeah.
Right.
If people understand all that goes into it, there'll be less of a rebellion when they get the rate increase.
Okay, well, hopefully that sounds good. Yeah, so ideally, we would state that we'll have the first one May 28th, and that we'll be having another one in June, at the next meeting. The only thing I'm noting is that there could be the possibility where, as Steve was saying, she might have a number of things to address and maybe might not be able to come back in June.
But we could continue the discussion.
Yeah, we'll continue the discussion, exactly.
Okay, so, and
So
then,
just to ask Gabe, and of course Jennifer's here also, we think that's a doable thing within 2 weeks to get a letter out.
Yeah, that was, even Samantha, that was one of Samantha's recommendations.
Okay,
Is that
good.
we put some PR out there to kind of warm the public up to this coming. Now, you guys are in the driver's seat of this water rate study. It's partially the ratepayers, they call it a protest hearing. It's not, they don't get to vote yes or no, but if 51% of the vote of the ratepayers all outcry, and we've got a list of them that say, no, go back to the drawing board, we go back to the drawing board. Or if you have 20 of them in here and they're loud and they don't like it, or if it's the right group of people who are going to be affected the most, you can say, go back to the drawing. The rate study is being paid for by the Department of Water Resources, but are through money, right, coming through to RCAC. So this is
And it's actually USDA.
or, I'm sorry, USDA.
Yeah.
Right. Excuse me. It was USDA. So the USDA is paying for us to have our rate study done. Last time we checked on it, GHD, this was back to Jack's question about why didn't we do this sooner? I think it goes back to 2018, 19. And I think it was the GHD at that time said it would be about $15,000. So I know they have some budget restrictions in terms of how much time, but last time I checked with her, she is well under budget at this point from USDA for this particular project. So if we have to have a second or third hearing, we gotta do it.
I mean, nobody ever likes a rate increase, but I expect the questions to center a bit more on the water plant expenses and the water reserves and more of those kinds of questions, which I think we can answer and hopefully in the meeting, but.
And the other thing that we need to get across to everybody is, when she adds up what the expenses are, somehow we gotta cover those expenses. It's like, okay, how do we do it? That could be a second question. But for people to say, I want to keep the same rate, or I only want to increase it by $10, and it doesn't cover the expenses, it's unrealistic.
Right.
And I'm assuming it's pretty easy to follow up with or to also send the same letter by email so that folks like me who don't go to the post office every day can still know.
Multiple fronts. We'll be sending this message.
All right, so what I hear saying is that we can send a letter before May 28th and or email if available email addresses. And if staff needs help, then RCAC may be able to, or, please call on one of us if you need.
And the other part is to make sure that we comment that, we'll be having the meeting on the 28th, and then we'll also have Zoom available so that people can choose between the two rather than trying to squeeze too many people in one spot.
And then the other thing we're going to try to do is fit in a closed session, just so everybody knows, between now and the 28th. I guess we'll reach out for dates that work for everybody. A closed session to continue tonight's closed session discussion, which we didn't finish. So, and then I would like to tee up annexation. I'll just mention that again. We talked about having a LAFCO speaker come in and just for education purposes, but I think we could also talk about kind of what kind of annexation would we need to do, for example, to increase the size of our cemetery? Because apparently it's not just buying real estate. There might be a little annexation involved potentially, or would there be? That would be a good question. So I think there's kind of baby steps of just little annexation, and then there's the huge topic of annexation, which is a whole different thing.
And just to remind everyone, we have from the water studies, we have 3 areas pre-identified as already vetted annexation pockets, mostly in and around the frontage road in that area, going up north. So we already have areas for us to consider that were, well, in my opinion, well vetted by lots of different folks.
Yeah, like A, B, and C.
Yep, exactly. So zones, I would rather us continue at least to talk about those zones since they've already been thought of because of the amount of water customers that are there, the amount of increased revenue from X, Y, and Z taxes and such. So anyway, I don't want us to pay for something that we've already done.
Agreed. Yeah, that makes sense. So I wanted to tee that up. And then just one other thing, because the siren went off during our meeting. I was sort of thinking maybe it would be nice to have Sean come in once a quarter or something, not every month necessarily, but once a quarter and just kind of tell us what kind of calls they're getting for the volunteer fire department and, you know. I mean, they were out Saturday night down by my house. Someone had fallen on the trail and broke their ankle, fortunately. Yeah. And I just, really appreciated them coming out, and there was also CAL FIRE and so forth, so be interesting to hear what kind of calls they're getting. Okay, that's all I have for future topics. Any other, okay? All right, with that, I believe we are adjourned, so thank you, everyone.
He looked at it and asked. Oh, funny. Oh, sweet. You don't have to do any work. That just makes me, I get to my gin and tonic. Hey.